Welcome, welcome. Welcome back to From Middle Class to Millions. I'm going to point out something right now. I've already recorded this podcast, looked up, and nothing was recorded. So I'm in great spirits. And it just goes to show, like, you you do things and sometimes you do them imperfectly and it still works out. All right. So first thing I wanted to talk to you guys about, because I mentioned this in the original recording of this, is I haven't been talking about any current events, reality TV, any of that stuff for the past few weeks because I've been promoting these webinars, and I'm glad that I did. I do miss talking about that stuff, so I'm going to do that next week, but I'm glad that I did because the December webinar had a fantastic turnout. More than 100 people registered. I did another webinar just this past Thursday, and that had a fantastic turnout as well. And so clearly, people want to talk about money. People want to talk about their comfort levels, their confidence, how they can build the $1 million net worth, what they can do. Are they doing the right things? Will they have enough? Can they save for college? Can they buy a home? Can they still maintain their lifestyle? Will the money last? Can they take care of their aging parents? There are all these questions that came up, and I answered as many of them as humanly possible across the two different webinars. And so what really came out of that too, to me, is that people want to talk to somebody who is accessible, who's created wealth while working a 9 to 5, who wasn't born wealthy and, hasn't become this greedy billionaire. Like, none of those things can be used to describe me except for the stuff before the greedy billionaire. So I think that it is important that people have this opportunity to talk to people and that they can talk to somebody who can make it very clear and achievable. And it's not something that is intimidating. I know how difficult that is. I remember struggling, trying to understand what the heck were these people talking about. And there wasn't as much information out there at the time, so I had to get it from wherever I could. But then I also know now it's even more overwhelming because there's so much information, and it's like, okay, whom do I turn to? Because there's so many conflicting pieces of information that people tend to shut down. So I know that these webinars are beneficial, and I'm glad that I did that. And I'm probably going to do different approaches to getting the word out to people that we're here and we're talking about money and come into this space and it's safe and you could ask all the questions. However, today I'm not talking about anything tactical. I'm not talking about which account to open, how much to invest, what to do with it. Those things are important. I have a lot of episodes about those, so definitely go check those out if that's what you're looking for. However, I think that what I'm talking about today is even more important because it will help you determine if you're ever going to even get to the point where you talk about which account's better, how much to invest, and all of those things. What I'm talking about today is what happens when fear takes over. And the reason why I'm bringing this up today is because I had an incident myself not too long ago where I noticed that fear was starting to take over, and how I responded to it was very similar to what I see from a lot of folks who sometimes get on a call with me and the fear starts to take over with them as well. And so I'm going to walk you through a consultation that I had with someone not too long ago and what happened why she booked the call, and then what happened during the call and after the call. And I think it's just fascinating. And then I'm also going to share how I witnessed myself have a fearful moment. And I've had many of them over the years, please. But I had a fearful moment not too long ago and how I responded to it and how I was able to identify what was going on. All right. So let's call the person that got on the phone with me. Let's call her Elaine. We're going to stick to last week's Seinfeld theme, and we're going to call the woman who booked the call with me Elaine. And the reason why Elaine booked the call with me was because something had happened in her life that made her incredibly scared. And that's what caused her to book the call. But then she didn't move forward with working together because she was scared. And so I want you to know that before you even think about how you feel about what I'm describing, I want you to know a couple things about Elaine, okay? She's not how society likes to depict women. She's not irresponsible with her money. She's not reckless. She's not bad with her money. She's none of those things. In fact, she's quite thoughtful with her money. She describes herself as extremely frugal. She's spiritual. She works really hard. She's been working since she was 15 years old. She has very little debt, like revolving debt, like on a credit card that she pays off every single month. And she has some savings. Okay. So she's none of the ways in which women are described when it comes to money. Like they're just these bumbling idiots who, are just really irresponsible. None of those things at all would I use to describe Elaine. But even having said that, she still allowed fear to win. And I'm going to share with you why this is the case. And I want it to be clear because it's the moment you're going to notice that there's a certain moment that separates the women who decide they're going to move towards financial independence and wealth and the ones who remain stuck and continue to build up a lot of anxiety and panic and worry, even though they're like Elaine, they're doing all the right things. All right. So let me first describe why Elaine booked this call. I said that she booked a call because something happened in her life that made her really scared. And I'm not opposed to sometimes fear is what's needed to propel you to move forward, right? Sometimes fear is what's needed to propel you to take action. That isn't always the case, but it isn't always a bad thing. And so what happened to Elaine is Elaine has a sister-in-law. So her husband's sister is quite wealthy. And both Elaine and her family with her husband and Elaine's husband's brother and his family live in houses that are owned by their rich sister. Okay. So think about that. There's the rich sister. She has two brothers. The two brothers each live in a house that's owned by her and they pay her rent and their families live in those houses. All right, fine. So Elaine's brother-in-law, okay, her husband's brother, passed away. When he passed away, his sister evicted his wife and children. Yeah, that's right. She was like, you got to get out. You got to get out of my house. I want to use that house for whatever. I don't know what she's planning on doing it or not doing with it or whatever the case. She's like, you and your kids got to get out. Well, that scared the crap out of Elaine. And rightfully so, because Elaine also said the sister and her don't get along. They're not bosom buddies and lifelong pals. So if something were to happen to Elaine's husband, Elaine was like, shoot, I could end up homeless. I could end up in this similar situation. Now, that's scary enough as it is. But I want you to understand that Elaine has already in her life experienced housing insecurity. Okay? She's experienced instability before. She's been homeless. She also had a situation where she had lost her money. She had get caught up in some, I don't remember if it was a Bitcoin or a crypto scam, but she had lost a lot of money before. And so Elaine knows about starting over. Elaine knows about starting from zero. And when she saw how quickly her sister-in-law's life unraveled because she was at the mercy of somebody else, it triggered something in her. She was like, this is real. And I never want to be in that position. And I never want to be in that position again where I'm homeless. So all of these fears that Elaine had were very valid. They were rather rational. I mean, it was those fears and watching what happened that made her decide, let me get on a call with this woman. And I think she had someone had sent her one of my emails or she had gotten my podcast or something like that. And she was like, all right, this is serendipitous. The time to act is right now. So when Elaine and I got on the phone or on the call, and she wasn't asking me some of the questions that a lot of people ask me, like people want to know exactly what should I do? What should I invest in? Some people come to me with those questions. They want to understand why it is that they're not moving forward or their portfolios aren't performing, or how can they get into real estate or vending machines, or there's a lot of how, right? But Elaine was different because Elaine wanted to feel safe. Like, Elaine told me she wasn't sleeping. She wanted to be able to sleep at night. She wanted to know that she was going to be okay if, God forbid, something happened to her husband. Elaine wanted to have her own money. And she wanted to stop panicking. Those feelings and emotions and the thoughts that Elaine had were very different than the tactical questions that a lot of people ask. And that's why I said this episode is going to be a little bit different, because yeah, all of those things are important, but none of that's going to sink in to Elaine if she's not sleeping, if she's in a constant state of worry. And although Elaine said to me, look, she had $30,000 in cash saved in a safety deposit box, not in a high yield savings account, in a safety deposit box at the bank. She had, like I said, very little debt, just the revolving stuff of expenses that she took care of every month. And she said she was painfully frugal. She didn't even want to be that frugal. She wanted to actually do more with her life, but she couldn't bring herself to spend any money on herself because she was terrified. Even before what had happened to her sister-in-law. Because her money didn't feel safe to her. It didn't feel secure. And quite honestly, she couldn't even see it. So it felt untouchable. So it felt like it wasn't even there. And if she did anything at all, made any movements, spent any of it, anything happened, she was afraid she'd lose it all again. So all of this fear that Elaine had made complete and perfect sense. Anybody listening to her would be like, yeah, okay, I get it. If you didn't know the backstory, you'd be like, why do you have all this cash in a box, safety deposit box at the back of the bank? But when you hear what she'd experienced, what life was like for her growing up, what she had gone through, yeah, it made sense. But there were other things going on in Elaine's life. Elaine wanted to do this without her husband knowing. She said he was controlling and that even though he didn't believe in investing in a particular way, and she was worried and she didn't know anything about the money he had, and she wanted to take care of herself. She also had a business, and I'm going to have a little sidebar here. Like so many women who have businesses or business ideas or are worried about their current jobs and want to start something just in case something happens to their job and they can't replace their income, they're sitting there waiting and not taking action. And of course, think about it. If you're someone like Elaine who has these legitimate fears, even though she had a business that she could monetize and grow, she struggled with the consistency of it. She struggled with taking chances and risks with it. She struggled with investing in it because she was so fearful. So of course it wasn't making as much money as it could. Of course it was keeping her small. Of course she wasn't able to build upon that money, even though she had tons of experience and a pretty strong presence in her niche. The fear was holding her back. So there were things that I knew that Elaine could do, dare I say should do, that could turn this situation around. I mean, the first thing, and not in any particular order, but I think this was really important. I thought that Elaine had to get that money out of the safety deposit box. I wanted Elaine to have that money in a high yield savings account, not only because, yes, it makes sense for her to build interest. And while it's sitting in the safety deposit box, inflation is causing it to rot because it's been in there for a while and she's not making a cent on it. So she's not making a smart choice and making her money make money for her. But more importantly, I wanted Elaine to see the money. When the money is in the high yield savings account, she can log on and see it. Then it doesn't feel like this nebulous thing. It's actually there. Every day she could look at it if she wanted to. Not that I would encourage some obsessive staring at your money and logging in every morning, but I wanted her to know that it's there. It didn't have to be hidden away in a fearful way. It could be right there in front of her. She could see it. She could track it. She could trust that it's actually there for her to protect her. And once that is there for her and she can see that, then she can learn how to invest, but slowly and intentionally. We're not talking huge risks, right? We're not saying do things that just seem really risky and put it all in one certain stock. No. But imagine Elaine learning the skill of investing so that she could understand her risk tolerance, so that she could watch her money grow instead of shrinking in a box in the back of the local bank. And I know that when she had that comfort level of the emergency fund that actually would have a number associated with it of her expenses and not just a pile of cash that she has sitting there, not knowing if even that is enough to take care of her if or when the time arose, she could actually have something concrete. She could actually watch that money remain secure, remain safe, and make a little bit of interest for her, and then learn to make some more money by investing. Because of course you can't build wealth solely on savings. But she could build up her literacy and her tolerance for risk. All the while, she could actually start building her business, making her business grow, understanding that the money and the revenue and the proceeds that she makes from her business, she could then feed into more investments. These wouldn't be isolated activities. No, this would be part of a larger plan so that she could start to feel comfortable. This isn't going to be some pixie dust. We're talking about actual structure, learning the skills, building up the momentum. We discussed this, and she was all for it. She actually liked the plan. I mean, it sounded good. It sounded safe in her body. It made sense to her. She wanted it. She wanted to do it. But then, what happens to all of us? Fear pops up. It's quiet. Okay? It's quiet and it's reasonable. That's how fear appears. And the way it appeared in the conversation with Elaine is she started asking some very interesting questions. Like, what if I can't keep up with the business? What if something happens and I need to stop working in the business? What if I have to pause? What if I'm committing to something I can't finish? Fear doesn't show up and say, stop, don't do it, run in the other direction. No, not this kind of fear. This kind of fear shows up and it's like, slow down. Or better yet, just wait. Just wait. Just wait. Right? Because if you wait, you can be careful. And if you wait, you can protect yourself. But that's actually not what's going on. What's going on is there's a new fear that shows up. And what it did in this case with Elaine is it replaced the old fear, like the original fear. She no longer was worried about, I'm going to be homeless again, or have no safety, or, worry if something went wrong and that she would be homeless. Like that went away. But this new fear that came in was way more insidious. And it got louder and louder and louder. Because this fear, which is very tricky, is the fear that comes in and it convinces people, smart people, capable people, that it's way better and way safer to stay still than to move forward. And that's the fear that has her hoarding cash in a box in the back of a local bank. That's the fear that is telling her that she can't invest. She doesn't know how. She doesn't understand it. She shouldn't. That's the fear that just tells you to just wait. Wait until next year. wait until you have more information, wait until, you've learned some more. The joke is that, like, when you wait, it doesn't create safety. It doesn't create any more safety. All it creates is more anxiety. Because when you think of the things that Elaine and I were talking about, the things that we were talking about creating, an emergency fund doesn't create fear. It actually comes from a plan that creates security. Investing doesn't remove safety, it builds it. And businesses don't start growing because people feel fearless. They grow because people act even though they're scared. So you can't push past fear. You can't wait for fear to disappear. It disappears after you take action. This is what I see when I get on these calls. And the difference between a group of women who feel fearful, okay? They acknowledge it, they name it, and they move anyway. They take the steps anyway because they're like, I have to learn these skills. And when they learn the skills, that builds momentum. And when they learn the skills and build momentum, they're the ones who create options. They're the people in society that we say, oh, they're just lucky. They're not lucky. They're not lucky. They just keep going. They don't let the new fear replace the original fear and drown it out and get louder so that the new fear takes over. They don't do what the other group of women do who also feel the fear, but they let it get really loud and decide that it makes more sense for them to remain frozen, to amp up the anxiety, and just stay still and hope that things will change when in actuality they won't. And if they do, especially when it comes to money, it's never for the better. And it doesn't mean that the former group is smarter than the latter group. It doesn't mean that the former group is more responsible. It doesn't mean that they're more disciplined. The only thing that it means is that the first group doesn't allow the new fear to make the decision about what they're going to do. They just don't. I was telling you before that I had a similar situation to Elaine, right? In the sense that I had an opportunity that presented itself to me and I felt that fear again. And I've felt that fear many times in my life. I felt the fear when I moved countries. I felt the fear when I moved cities. I felt the fear when I moved states. I felt the fear when I first invested. I felt the fear when I was investing in real estate for the first time outside of my primary residence. I felt the fear when I left my corporate job to retire early when I knew nobody who had done this before. I felt that fear. I felt the fear many, many times. And I felt the fear when I just had an opportunity present itself not too long ago, a couple weeks ago, where this investment, which would be a large financial investment, but if it worked in my favor and I got the return that is expected, this would set up my great grandchildren at the very least. And when that opportunity presented itself and I went through the numbers and I looked at it and all of the things, my original fear of, I don't know what I'm doing. Who do you think you are? You've never known anybody who's invested. You've never invested in the stock market. Like, those were my fears from way back when. Okay. Way back when. Those have been replaced by other fears. And now there was a fear of, like, who do you think you are to make this level of investment? How could you create this amount of wealth? How would it be possible that you know what you're doing? Like, it was like, And I had to sit with that fear for a minute. I did. I had to sit with it. And I was like, look at that. I still have these fears that creep up. And they're loud as heck. And they're reasonable. You don't need more money. You're good. These kids, like your great-grandchildren don't have to figure it out themselves. And all sorts of things. I mean, all sorts of things came up. But I'm a woman from the first group. I've noticed that there's the fear. And I acknowledged it. And I said, you can make a decision right now. If you're going to make a decision about moving forward, don't let it be the fear that makes the decision for you. You make the decision for yourself. Not the fear. Not the fear. And so when I hear the Elaines in the world who decide for themselves that they want to feel safe and they don't want to mess this up and they don't want to, they've been burned before and things like that. I get it. I get it. That fear is trying to protect you, but that fear is also what keeps you small. But for every single Elaine that lets the fear make the decision, I'm committed to finding 5 Elaines that are like, oh no, I want more for myself. I'm going to do this for myself. And even though the fear's there, I'm still going to choose me. I'm going to choose the me that I want to become. So if you've heard yourself in any of this, whether you're the women from group 1 or the women from group 2, if it's fear that you let make these choices for you, or if you acknowledge the fear and you still say, hey, no, I'm going to make the choice even though I'm fearful, I commend you. I commend you. Because even hearing this is tough. It really, really is. But it makes all the difference in how you live your life once you understand who's making the choices. All right. I want you to rate this podcast, please. And I would love it if you share it. Share it with anybody you know that uses money. And I will be back next week. Take care.